Hello and welcome to the Wheel of Crime podcast. This podcast features two ladies who play games, mumble profanities, and laugh way too often. This podcast also covers topics of sensitive nature, and as such, listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome back to the Wheel of Crime podcast. My name is Jen, and we've forgotten how to be podcasters.
Literally, my brain short-circuited, and it was just like, hello! And then I blanked after that, and I was like, oh no! What do I say?
What's my line?
Literally, and I don't even have it written down anywhere, because for how long I've been saying the same thing, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to write this down anywhere, I just know it. Apparently, that is high hopes, because that is not what happened today. But hello, and welcome. How was your week?
That is Emily, by the way.
Oh yeah, my name's Emily. Tee-hee.
Tee-hee. My week was good. How was yours?
Good, just, the normal chaos, because January hits and all of the garbage comes together, and I'm like, bah! And then I'm just playing catch up until March. So that's been my work life anyways, so lots of that. And then my personal life has been good, some stress here and there, but I think that's just how she goes sometimes. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like life is not in general right now too entertaining, which is nice. I like having things balance out, where if my work life is busy, my personal life is not busy. Having everything all the time is not good. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just what it is.
That's fair. I'm emotionally trying to recover from January still. And work is heckin' busy because I genuinely had no time for it in January, and now I'm playing a bit of catch up, so that's how she goes this week, but hopefully by April we'll find some sort of equilibrium in my life again.
Yes, so that the trending theme for this week is that is how she goes. I'm good with that. And yeah, I wish I had more interesting things to say, but yeah. I don't know. But yes, I know for a fact that you do not know what today's topic is, so I'm excited to spin the wheel of questions here and see if you can piece it together. Are you ready?
Yes, let's get into it.
All right. All right. What is your favorite historical site? See, I think that for my own sake, I'm going to start with the ones that my favorite one that I've been to that's a historical site, and one that I would be really interested in seeing. So, one of my favorite places that I've been to actually is, honestly, I've been to this one a few times just because it's, decently close to where Jen and I live. But there's, an abandoned mine that you can go check out in, Dinosaur Town, Drumheller. And just the vibes of Drumheller and, the dinosaur and the old mining theme and all those things, I'm just fascinated. I've also been to a place called Fort Steele, which is a pioneer town that they keep running historically. So they have actors there who dress and act out the pioneer jobs for that place. And that one was also really cool. That's in BC somewhere. And as for places that I haven't gone that I would really like to see, I would like to go to see the catacombs in Paris, just because I do think that'd be really interesting in a kind of spooky way. And then I would also like to see, I forget the name of it. There's supposed to be a castle of some kind in Austria or Switzerland that they used for when they were making The Sound of Music that has a history to it. So that would be a cool one to see too.
That's fair. The Paris catacombs are very interesting. That was on my list when I went to Paris, and I felt like it was really cool. That's one that I really liked. I feel like one of my favorites is the Palace of Versailles. It's just so opulent and interesting to see how looks everything was, even in ye old days. And then one that I really want to go to, there is a lot, but I feel like the pyramids of Giza would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really seen anything in that part of the world, so I feel like that would be really cool.
Yeah. Or like something like Machu Picchu.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. There's just so many cool places around the world, and it's all steeped in history because humans have been on this planet for ages. There's just so much. It's all cool.
Very cool.
All right. Let's move on to our next question. So, what is your opinion? And this is going to be a weirdly phrased question because I didn't really know how to write it. But like, what is your opinion on people who live in very rural areas? And so obviously there are people who do and always have, and that's like not really of an opinion. But like, I'm talking more people who actively seek out living in rural areas compared to like cities or like other things like that. Like, what is your thoughts on kind of like that type of people, or like what the motivations might be for those types of choices?
I think it's interesting, especially when you look at communities who purposefully isolate themselves and have not really indulged in any sort of technological advances. And like, there's like there's a couple still remaining to this day that are on like remote part of the earth and don't really have any contact with outward civilization, and that's interesting. I have a hard time imagining that because we live in, North America, and everything is like very much same here, but it's an interesting idea. My problem comes when people from like Europe or North America try and go to these communities that obviously don't want contact with anyone and try and like force themselves upon others.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure, yeah. And it's like, I almost think too that like when people do travel to smaller communities or smaller places where it's not like super populated, it's almost like people are it's more of the community thing. Like when you're living in a city, like you're still in like communities, but there's just so much more diversity and like opportunity in different areas. It's just almost like chasing like something that's like simplified, or trying to find like-minded thinkers like that. Like, I think that's kind of what happens, but also like it's hard to say because like what you were saying, it's just so different when you go around the world for like what it really means to be in a rural community. So yeah, it is an interesting thought though.
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
Let's spin for our next question.
Yeah. I am tired and hungry, and I'm losing my mind. What are your thoughts on natural disasters? Do you have like a favorite one? Do you have a least favorite one?
I would say they're probably all my least favorites. It's like a weird irrational fear that I have of natural disasters. I don't know why, but like I'm genuinely terrified because...
For real?
Yeah, like that. I am like genuinely terrified of natural disasters, and like, when you hear about like those like hurricanes that go through like Florida that are super destructive, like that's a really scary situation, and I'm always like scared that if I'm going somewhere I'll get stuck in one of those, and that's terrifying.
This would be
mainly because I have terrible luck, and
that's fair.
It would happen to me.
Yeah. Weird. This is the first time anybody in my life has ever said something like that. Everybody I know loves natural disasters, at least like in our area, because it usually is like, like a severe windstorm or like all these other things. Or my husband and I drove through the starting part of a tsunami once, and he thought that was like one of the coolest things he's ever done in his life. Nope,
not me.
I have cousins who are like tornado chasers, so they live in the country, and if there's like tornadoes happening, they're tornado chasers, and that's just what they do.
That's horrifying to me. I would never.
Weird. Like, I could understand the thrill of a good windstorm. Like, I love it when you're, like, sitting at the window and you can just see, like, all of, like, the shit being picked up off the ground and the trampolines flying into the street. I'm like, yay!
No, like, even as a kid, because we lived in... I feel like our hometown, there was occasional tornadoes, but it wasn't really that common. But I remember one time there was a tornado warning, and I was shaking in my boots. I was, like, so scared about what was gonna happen.
Really?
Yeah, I was, like, fucking hiding. I was like, I'm gonna die.
Were you still living in our hometown when the sideways tornado struck?
When was that?
Oh, God, I don't remember. It would have been, like 5 or so years ago now, so maybe. But basically, in our hometown, we had something, there's, like, an actual scientific name for it, but I just remembered as the sideways tornado, because basically, instead of it touching down like a normal one, where it's like, but tornadoes normally happen vertically, right? Like, all the currents are happening up top, but it strikes normally either diagonally or vertically, right? So we had one in our hometown that actually was, fully side to side. So we had one that actually struck horizontally. So basically the currents, rather than being up top in the clouds were low enough where it was actually causing it to happen like in this type of rotation, kind of like if you're like rolling a barrel down a hill. And that's how it hit our town, where it like rolled through the river valley and actually came up the other side, and all of the trees and everything were flattened, like literally as if like a barrel had just came through, but like on a massive scale.
That's horrifying. I don't think I was there then, because I would have been shaking in my boots.
Like, my husband's workplace was actually in the warpath for that, and he was stuck at the shop when it was happening. And our neighbor's roof got ripped off, and, like, there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened. All the power lines were down. He couldn't come home that night because, the power lines that all came down basically trapped him in the industrial park.
That's scary. I don't like that.
I was outside in my safety glasses at my parents' house picking shingles and nails off of the driveway because my dad was like, you better get those nails off the driveway. I'm coming home from work right now. And I was like, fuck my life. This like wind is like pushing me over and I'm wearing my safety glasses and I'm like, this is stupid. More shingles keep flying off. I'm gonna be stuck out here forever. Yeah, I'm gonna find more nails. The tire's gonna blow up and it's all gonna be my fault. And the reason it was me is because my mom had taken the rest of my siblings out to go for a walk at one of our natural areas in town from the place that we're from. And she was saying, though, that they literally drove almost there and the power lines were swinging so harshly that two of the power lines actually connected. And there was just like this enormous ball of like heat and electricity that blew up basically right beside the car. And she was like, and I won't lie to you, Emily, I put it in reverse and I drove home after that. She's like, we were not going to be going on that walk anymore. Because that's how quick it hit too, by the way. It was literally like, you were like, oh, it's kind of like an overcast day. And then you're like looking out your window and you're like, it's like a little windy. And then literally within like 10 minutes, it was like shit hit the fan.
That is heckin' spooky. I don't like that at
I was
all.
excited. I was like, there was like a neighbor's tree that fell down. I'm like, look, it's nature. Look at all this nature, right? So yeah, no. So I can't believe I don't. You know what? You probably were in Kamloops or something at that time because yeah, if you were around, you would have been shitting your britches.
Would've, sure would've.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right. Let's move on to our last question then. Would you ever live somewhere that is rumored to be unsafe to live in?
No, that's why I moved out of my moldy apartment.
See, here's the thing though. The key word being rumored. So say somebody tells you this, but like when you look at like the people who are actually living there and like crime stats and everything, you're like, I don't know. It looks okay. Would you go off of somebody just telling you?
Do I trust this person?
Let's say this is somebody who you just have like a mid relationship with, like they would neither do you harm nor good. Like, you don't know them well enough to, like, have them be well informed of your decisions, but they're probably telling you something that they've heard.
Right. I feel like I probably would just like steer clear because I got enough problems. I genuinely don't need any more. So at the slight chance of I'm gonna get murdered or mugged or someone's gonna vandalize my car or it's all crack dents for bed bugs, like I'm not gonna be there. You won't see me there.
I actually, you know what, that is pretty valid considering your literal history from this last month. Let me see. For myself, I think it would, like what you asked me, like it would depend on who was telling me, because if it's just like some a-hole off the street, I'd be like, yeah, okay. But like say it's like I said, just somebody who you know who is from the area and has neither good nor bad relations with you. I think I would also steer clear, but I would also like be mindful of like what it is they're saying, because if it's crime stuff, like that's kind of a hard one to pinpoint. But if it was like say like something else where they're like, oh, there's like ghosts here, or because we were just talking about natural disasters, or like there's natural disasters or whatever, I would definitely keep an eye on it. I'd be like,
Yeah.
this is an interesting thing to be worried about. Maybe I should be. This is like in the place Andrew and I just moved to back in October. It has a history of tornado touchdowns. And so I've had so many people since we've moved here be like, don't you worry about the tornadoes and the touchdowns or whatever, because it does get very, very windy in the spring, I guess. But like, meh. I'm choosing to not be worried about it.
Fair. Me, personally, I would be very worried about it.
You're like, but I am worried for you. Well, the only reason I'm like not super worried about it is the only one that like fully touched down and like killed people happened in like 2006 or something, 2003. And most of the other ones, when they do touch down, it touches down on either farmland and they're only like partial touchdowns, or they touch down on the lake itself, which is actually apparently proven to be useful because they keep finding like bodies and stuff that people dump in there. So it's actually pretty helpful.
As if that lake wasn't toxic enough.
As if it wasn't toxic enough, I know, but here we are. But there was room left to be impressed, I guess.
Oh god.
And yeah. But yeah, I feel like though if I was moving somewhere and they were like, yeah, there's literally like a homeless man that lives in the basement and knifes people if they disturb him, I'd be like, yeah, I don't think I want to live there, thank you.
Yeah, I think I might pass. That's fine.
Yeah,
I'll find somewhere else to go.
Yeah, I'll have other places to be. But yeah, so can you guess what my topic is for you today?
I think I know it, but I'm gonna guess it's about some sort of group of people who do not want to be disturbed in the natural disasters where they live.
Wrong. You did not nail it this time.
Okay, what is it?
My story for you today, I will tell you the description first. So, a ghost town, or alternatively deserted cities or abandoned cities, are abandoned village, town, city, usually one that contains substantial visible remaining buildings and infrastructure such as roads. A town often becomes a ghost town because of the economic activity that supported it, so either industrial or agricultural, had failed or ended for some reason, so the host or deposit exhausted by metal mining would be an example. Or the town may have been declined because of natural or human-caused disasters, such as floods, prolonged droughts, extreme heat, extreme cold, government actions, uncontrolled lawlessness, war, pollution, or nuclear disasters. The term can sometimes refer to cities, towns, and neighborhoods that, though still populated, are significantly less so in the past years, or, for example, those affected by high levels of unemployment and dereliction.
Is this about the rock slide?
I have a couple. So, basically, with the subject of ghost towns, there's just a generalized list of ghost towns. So what I did is I picked out some ones that I think have kind of like an interesting story behind it. Or an
Mm-hmm,
interesting
mm-hmm.
or an interesting reason in how and why they became ghost towns.
I see.
Yes, because it is quite intriguing, if I do say so myself. So, with that, I will start with the one that you and I talked about briefly last time, which is Turtle Mountain.
Ooh.
Yes. So, to start with, Lillian Clark, 15, was working late at the hotel in Frank on April 28th. So, her employer had offered her a room for the night, and it was the first time that the young girl remained away from home overnight. Lillian's mother, Amelia, had never trusted the hotel's previous owners and would never let her eldest child stay overnight, no matter how late she was working. But the hotel had come under new management, people that Amelia had learned to trust, and so Lillian settled in for the night. And Amelia Clark could not have known that her trust in Lillian's new employers would actually end up saving the girl's life. So, on April 29th, 1903, at 4:10 a.m., so like we're now over 100 years later. Just to put that as a frame of reference for people, like this didn't even happen like in the distant past. This is still like decently new as far as history goes. So at 4:10 a.m. in 90 seconds, 82 million tons of limestone sheared off the east face of Turtle Mountain and roared down into what we know as Crow's Nest Pass. The avalanche took with it a coal mine entrance, 2 kilometers of railway, 2 ranches, and a part of Frank, which is now a part of Alberta today, but at the time was a part of the Northwest Territories. So, of the town's approximately 600 inhabitants at the time, nearly 100 were in the path of the avalanche, which took an estimated 70 lives at the time, though the exact toll will never be known. There may have been people in the area unknown who were never counted among the dead, because it was rural ish, especially around the area.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, they had around 23 survivors, and most of them were children. Um, so, the Blackfoot and the Kootenai people knew Turtle Mountain as the mountain that moves. That would be why it's called Turtle Mountain, by the way. I'm not sure if I touch it later on in the story, but basically it's called Turtle Mountain because it moves at the pace of a turtle, but it still moves, which I thought was
Right.
interesting. So their stories say that they would not camp near it, and it was named Turtle Mountain by, and so that's the thing too. So that's like, they say that the First Nations people named it, but then they also say that another man named Lewis Garnett, who was a rancher in the area, said that the mountain has the face of a turtle with like a shell rising behind it as its overall shape, and so like, in like traditional settler way, they say also that this man is a reason also why it's named Turtle Mountain, but I'm assuming it's probably for the other reason.
Typical white man takes credit for someone else's work. It's fine.
Yeah, it's completely unheard of. I am
Yeah.
just so surprised.
Shocked.
Yeah, shocked. The 2,000-meter high mountain was thrust up from the Rocky Mountains about 7 to 80 million years ago, overriding structurally weaker deposits of limestone and coal, and the additional movement cracked the inverted V of the mountain peak, creating a conduit for water, which then opened up fissures and gaps where water would then settle in, and then upon freezing, expand and create internal pressure. And that's kind of like the science behind like what exactly would have caused this to happen to the mountain so frequently. But at the time, they also had mining operations, which then further compromised this mountain, which was already considered to be unstable. But they didn't really know that at the time. They just had the stories from the First Nations people to go off of,
Right.
and that was really it. But there was more
Yikes.
snow than usual in that time during the winter of 1902 to '03. And April was unusually warm, with snow melt and rain running down the mountain fissures before the weather had a cold snap, which is like super typical for Alberta and absolutely checks out. On April 28th, the water in the mountain froze, and the mountain that moves literally reached a breaking point at that time. So, in the aftermath of the slide, stories of survival were miraculous and have generated at least one urban myth. Anyone who has heard of the Frank slide has heard of the baby girl, the only survivor, found on the border. Although this story has been proven to be untrue, people do admit that it is loosely grounded in fact. So basically, they're like, there is no official proof of like that particular story of the girl who was staying in the hotel overnight, and that sort of thing. But there is no like saying that it didn't happen either, which is why they're like saying it's like, oh, it's like mythical. But they do have proof that there were survivors. So there, it's like neither here nor there. But
Right.
Basically, they do know for sure, though, that there were among the 23 survivors, three little girls had survived the slide. And their names are Fernie Watkins, who was found in the debris, 15-month-old Marion Leach, who was thrown from her house into a pile of hay, and has now been referred to as being the Boulder Baby because she's the only survivor of her whole family. Um, Gladys Ennis, who was 27 months old, was found in mud by her mother Lucy, who had saved her baby's life by clearing mud out of her nose and throat at that time. So as the slide hit, it would have taken things with it. And that would have been what happened. And then Gladys was the last survivor of the slide when she died in 1995 in Bellevue, Washington, is how I'm pretty sure you say that. So yeah, so interesting. And like, in the cause of natural disasters, it would never even cross my mind that children younger than like 2 or 3 years old would have survived at all, especially with all the adults that didn't make it.
Yeah, that's crazy. And, like, I don't know. It would be so sad, though, to be the only person left in your whole family.
Right? And then be referred to as the Boulder Baby for the rest of your life. I would take some personal issue with the news reporters of that time.
Same.
Oh, yeah, you're so-and-so, the Boulder Baby. Wow, thank you. Not like I have a different name.
The most traumatic thing that ever happened. I love that.
Yeah, it's super great. But yeah, so that would be like among the younger survivors too. So Lillian Clark, who I'd mentioned from the urban legend, was not the only person to escape the disaster by being away from home. But hers might also be one of the more tragic stories, as Lillian's mother and 6 siblings died in that landslide. And her father, Alfred, was working in the mine that night, but stopped for lunch at around 4 o'clock. Him and another miner were outside the mine when the deadly avalanche had struck, and the rest of their crew was still inside the mine and got trapped down there and were unable to be dug out safely.
Oh, no.
Yes. So 12 bodies then were pulled from the rubble in the days following the slide. The mine was reopened within weeks, and the buried section of the railway they had rebuilt. The town was moved to a different location. I wonder why. And life was restored. A road was built through the slide in 1906, and during road improvements in 1922, a construction crew found the skeletal remains of 7 people in the rubble while they were building the road.
Brutal.
Right? So this is why they're saying that, like, this is... So the story of Turtle Mountain 2 is known to be one of continual tragedy. They call it a continuous tragedy. Because even though I told you, like, in the beginning, like, they knew that there was, like, somewhere between 400 to 600 people living there at the time. They found 23 survivors, and they're like, oh, but, like, the numbers are skewed. It's like... That's still probably around 400 people between, like, being in the mines and in the town who are, like... ceasing to exist all over the place, like, you know, and you would never even find the remains unless you were, like, digging up parts of the area. So it is known as, like, a continuous tragedy for that reason.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if you touch on this later, but I think that they don't try and dig it up anymore, right?
Yeah, at some point they kind of, like, retire the site just with the amount of, like, basically because of how unstable the area is. I think I could touch on it later, but yeah, people aren't really able to access the area anymore for, I mean, obvious reasons. But yeah, so, but like I was saying, so they did find more skeletal remains while they were making the road. They found for sure 7 people. And there is some belief that, like I said from that story earlier, that people are like, oh, well, it's neither, like, proven or disproven. That they believe that to have been Clark's family, because that's kind of like the rumored area where she would have been staying at that time. But again, it was 1922. They're not going to, like, genetically test the bones and match up teeth and be like, oh, this is for sure her family members. They just say that they found 7 people. The numbers match with, like, her family. Could have been her family. So today, the towns of Frank and Hillcrest lie in the shadow of the mountain that continues to move. The sheared mountain and the vast field of rubble are reminders of what is considered to be Canada's biggest rock slide. But I'm also going to tell you about a couple other ones that are very interesting. So this next one is from Centralia, Pennsylvania. So in May of 1962, which is less than 100 years ago, The town council of Centralia, Pennsylvania met to discuss the new landfill. Earlier in the year, Centralia had built a 50-foot deep pit that covered an area about half the size of a football field to deal with the town's problem of illegal dumping. However, the landfill was getting full and they needed to clear it out before the town's annual Memorial Day celebration. And at the meeting, council members proposed a seemingly obvious solution. You burn the landfill, right?
Oh.
So you burn...
Bad call, councilman.
Yeah, they're like, well, we'll burn the garbage and then there won't be any more garbage and then we'll just put more garbage on top of the old garbage, right? So they're like, yeah, great idea. And at first, it seemed to work. So I'm just going to say the name again. Centralia, Pennsylvania, 1960s, okay? Less than 100 years ago. So we've been making bad decisions for a long time. Not like me or you personally, but like humanity. And I'm going to...
I did know that, but, sometimes you need it reaffirmed.
Exactly. And this is going to be one of those things because at first it seemed to work. The fire department lined the pit with an incombustible material to contain the fire, which they lit on the night of May 27th, 1962. And after the landfill's contents were ash, they doused the remaining embers with water. However, 2 days later, residents again saw flames. And then again a week later, on June 4th. Centralia firefighters were baffled as to where the recurring fire was coming from. They used bulldozers and rakes to stir up the remains of the burned garbage and locate the concealed flames, because they're like, what is happening, right? And then finally they discovered what was the cause. At the bottom of Centralia's trash pit, next to the north wall, was a hole 15 feet wide and several feet deep. Waste had concealed this gap, and as a result, it had not been filled with the fire-retardant material, and the hole provided a direct pathway to a labyrinth of old coal mines in which Centralia was built on top of. And so... And so soon the residents began complaining of foul odors entering their homes and businesses, and they noticed wisps of smoke coming out of the ground around the landfill. The town council brought in mine inspectors to check out the smoke, who then determined that the level of carbon monoxide in them were indeed indicative of a mine fire. They sent a letter to the Laney Valley Council Coal Company and stated that a fire of unknown origin was burning underneath their town. And the council, who obviously makes really good decisions, the LVCC, so the coal company, and the Susquehanna Coal Company, which owned the coal mine in which now the fire was running rampant, met to discuss ending the fire quickly and as cost-effectively as possible. But before they reached a decision, sensors detected lethal levels of carbon monoxide seeping out of the mine, and all of Centralia's area mines were then immediately shut down. So the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania tried to stop the spreading of the Centralia fire several times, but all attempts were unsuccessful. The first project involved excavating beneath Centralia. Pennsylvania authorities planned to dig out the trenches to expose the flames so they could extinguish them. However, the plan's architects underestimated the amount of earth that would have to be excavated by more than half, and they eventually ran out of funding. So the second plan involved flushing out the fire using a mixture of crushed rock and water, but uncommonly low temperatures at the time caused the water lines to freeze, as well as the stone grinding machine. The company also worried that the amount of mixture they possessed could not completely fill the mines, so they elected to fill them only halfway, leaving ample room for the flames to move about still. And eventually the project ran out of funding after going almost $20,000 over budget, and by that time the fire had spread about 700 feet from the landfill. But that did not stop some people from going around their daily lives. Living above the hot, smoking ground, the town population was still about 1,000 people by the 1980s, and the residents enjoyed growing tomatoes in the midwinter and not having to shovel their sidewalks when it snowed. So
that's hilarious.
So funny. So in 2006, Lamar Mervyn, the then 90-year-old mayor of Centralia, said that people had learned to live with it. We'd had other fires before, but they always burn out, and I guess this one didn't, he said. 20 years after the fire started, however, Centralia, Pennsylvania began to feel the effects of the eternal flames underground. Because at this point, it was quite literally hell on earth. Not exaggerating. So, residents started passing out in their homes from carbon monoxide poisoning. The trees started to die, and the ground was becoming ash. Roads and sideways began to buckle, and the real turning point came around on Valentine's Day in 1981 when a sinkhole opened up underneath 12-year-old Todd Domboski's feet. The ground was searing, and the sinkhole was 150 feet deep. He only survived because he was able to grab a hold of exposed tree roots before his cousin was able to pull him out.
That is horrifying. No!
I know! And so in 1983, Pennsylvania had spent more than $7 million trying to put this fire out and had no success.
Oh my God.
A child had almost died, and it was at that time that the government had decided to abandon the town. That year, the federal government appropriated $42 million to the purchase of Centralia, demolished all of the buildings, and relocated the residents. But not everyone wanted to leave. And so for the next 10 years, legal battles and personal arguments between neighbors became the norm. The local newspaper even published a weekly list of those who were leaving, until finally Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain in 1993, by which at that point only 63 residents remained. And officially, they became squatters in the houses that they'd owned for decades, because basically the government was like, you are on your own, goodbye.
Oh.
Yep. And so, even so, it didn't put an end to the town, and it still held its council and a mayor and paid its bills. And over the next 2 decades, residents fought hard to stay legally, and in 2013, the remaining residents, which are now fewer than 10, won a settlement against the state, and each was awarded $349,500 and ownership of their properties until they die, which at that point, Pennsylvania will seize the land and finally finish demolishing all of the buildings. So Mervyn, this 90-year-old man, recalled choosing to stay with his wife even when they were offered the bailout money. And he said, I remember when the state came and they wanted our house, he said. She took one look at that man and said, they're not getting it. And this is the only home I've ever owned, and I want to keep it. And that's what he said, and he died in 2010 at the age of 93, still illegally squatting in his childhood home. And it was the last remaining building on what was once a 3-block long stretch of row houses. So here we have the legacy of Centralia. So fewer than 5 people still live in Centralia, Pennsylvania as of today. So as experts estimate that there's enough coal underneath Centralia to fuel the fire for another 250 years. But the story and the infrastructure of the town has provided its own kind of fuel for creative endeavors. The real Silent Hill town that inspired the 2006 horror film is this abandoned Pennsylvania town. Though there is no real Silent Hill town, the movie used the setting and what happened to Centralia as a part of its plot. And the abandoned Route 61 that leads into the town center was also given a new life for many years. Artists transformed this 3/4-mile stretch into a local roadside attraction known as the Graffiti Highway. And even though the pavement cracked and smoked, people came from around the country to leave their mark. By the time a private mining company purchased the land once again and filled the road with dirt in 2020, nearly the entire surface was covered by spray paint. Today, Centralia, Pennsylvania is better known as a tourist attraction for people looking at a glimpse one of the plumes of noxious carbon monoxide-filled smoke rising from beneath the earth. The surrounding forest has crept in where a once thriving mainstream was long-lined demolished stores. People have called it a ghost town, but I look at it as a town that's now full of trees instead of people, says resident John Kominarski in an interview that was done in 2008. And the truth is, I'd rather be surrounded by trees than people. And that is my story of our of 2 really well-known ghost towns in history.
Listen, I hate moving as much as anyone, but I feel like if the ground is literally on fire, it's time to go.
Yeah, and I'm not even exaggerating when I say hell on earth, because I was looking at some of the pictures of what Centralia looks like in more recent days. And like this is not even a joke where they're like you see people's front yards and there is smoke coming out of cracks in the literal earth and there's no grass because it's all actual just ashes and burnt shit everywhere and like just holes all over the place. And I'm like, you could not, like, I get that the government, like, for some reason, well, not even for some reason, I understand why they were like, please leave, you're causing problems, and gave bailout money for these people. But like I would move for free. I would have moved for free.
Yeah, I mean, I can get it if you like own your home and you're like, I don't want to leave, and you've put your roots down in this town, but if everyone's going, the ground is on fire, your grass is ash, like, it's time to go. It's time to settle down in a new shitty town.
Literally, it's like you can't even have a garden other than like a rock garden because everything's on fucking fire all the time. Like, you know?
You know, I can understand the glory years when you could grow tomatoes year round, but we're past that now. It's time to move on.
Yeah, now you're like, oh, let me look outside at my like lovely bush that I planted 2 weeks ago. Oh wait, it's actually just a giant burnt stick because everything's on fire all the time.
Like, that doesn't sound enjoyable to me, but...
Well, yeah, and then it's like people can't even travel into the town, right? Because there's holes in the fucking road. So it's not like you're having your stores or anything restocked. These are literally just people bumming out of their own houses with nowhere to buy groceries. They can't grow anything on the land. There is nothing to do other than, like, for, like, the ending part where nowadays people go there to, like, see the novelty of it and then leave because it's hella dangerous and can kill you.
I do not have the level of commitment that some of these people have to stay there. I would be out.
Right?
You know, so fast.
And that is what I'm saying. But yes, that concludes my story for today. I hope everyone really enjoyed the craziness that is people and living in places, because I am also shocked. Except for when I'm not, which also happens.
True.
So with that, if you like today's episode or any of our episodes, you can leave us a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. They've updated everything now where there should be a star system in place, and a 5-star would help us greatly. We also have a website, which is www.wheelofcrime.com if you want to check us out on there and see what we're about. We also have a Patreon, which is @Wheel of Crime if you want to donate to the show. We have social media, which is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, which is all @Wheel of Crime. We have our email, which is wheelofcrime@gmail.com if you want to send us an email and just say whatever you like, or maybe you have your own story. We love any and all communication. It's so much fun. And you have a listener story you'd like to submit about anything true crime related, anything related to a story that we've covered, a spooky story of your own, feel free to submit. And that is available through all of our social media as well, because we, like I said, we love to hear from you guys and would love to do more themed episodes because they are just so fun to record.
Ha ha ha, yes. That's it. That's all. We will see you next week for another new episode. Okay, bye.
Bye.